해와와 다가로야 해영내 보노라 거대야
Jonah Lomu, born 12th of May 1975 in Auckland. No one could have known what an impact that bonny bouncing 11 pounds of baby would one day have on the sporting world. He'd become the youngest All Black of all time and then a global superstar, scoring tries that no one else could have.
New Zealand maintaining possession. Wide to Lomu. He's got the bounce. He's handed off his opposite.
I'd just like to take you back to 1995 where you very kindly put me on the international rugby stage. You running around Tony Underwood.
Lomu.
You getting ankle tapped by Will Carling, you stumbling towards me. Run over the top of me and scoring a fantastic try.
Meeting people like Jonah, obviously at the time of my life, my whole life is just focused on my treatment and every day, getting through each day, and just things like that can just take your mind off it, but in a good way, you know, give me a lift and can tell all my friends about it, you know. It's really valuable, and on behalf of all the people that you visited, I just have to say, you know, a big thank you. It really does make a difference.
That was from Jonah Lomu's... I want to bring back in our special guest, Phil Gifford, again. We got a snippet there of Jonah the man who blossomed from this young kid from South Auckland who said he might have fallen in with gangs if he hadn't found rugby and guidance.
It's true.
Measuring the man, he had a great impact on kids and young people, didn't he?
Yes, he did. I mean, one of the things about Jonah Lomu I always felt, and once his rugby career was over, in particular, Simon, when we saw more of that side of him, was that there is something, I think, that's extremely attractive to men, women and children in particular about a very, very big, strong man with a very gentle nature. And that was something that Jonah, I think, he'd always had it. Initially, he just thought it was shyness, but it turned out it was the man's personality. So you've got this guy that on the field had extraordinary physicality, but off the field was softly spoken and was thoughtful. And, yeah, but, I mean, a gentleman is
a real gentleman, wasn't it?
Yeah, he was.
It was like Michael Jones. He came under Michael Jones's mentorship and guidance, if you like. He'd always find that at the end of major games, they'd be there till the crowds had basically gone, signing every last autograph.
I don't think it's insignificant, Simon, that in the disastrous semi-final in 1999 at Twickenham against France, there were only 2 All Blacks that stayed out on the field and signed autographs, and one of them was Jonah Lomu. And so he was a he was sportsmanlike as well as everything else. And the other thing about him too that I thought was lovely, he was a guy that showed that if you were a great Polynesian sports person, you actually didn't need to be deeply religious. You didn't need to be like, say, the great Brian Williams, who had a law degree. You could be basically, and Jonah often said himself, that he was a South Auckland kid literally from the streets. And his great passions when he first got in the All Blacks were loud cars and loud music, and sometimes combined the two. I remember being before a test against Samoa and Napier, we heard this incredible sound. One of the other boys said, "Oh, that'll be Jonah," and he came around the corner in a car with the stereo turned up so loud that he was just himself, and yet he showed that those people that were maybe like noisy cars and noisy music could also be really good people as well.
Thanks very much for that, Phil Gifford. Well, a true All Blacks fan, Jonah Lomu, had only just returned from watching Richie McCaw's team make Rugby World Cup history, as Sav was talking about before. But before that triumphant final against Australia, he spoke to One News about the team's chances and the long-serving Super Six, the retiring players.
Whatever accolades they get from now on in is, you know, is well deserved, because they've been fantastic ambassadors for New Zealand and also All Black rugby. When you're talking about greatness, most people will go Sean Fitzpatrick as a hooker. He only played 90-odd Test matches. These guys played 100 plus. You know, that tells you something.
Can you see how that game's going to play out on Saturday night?
No, you know what? I just want the All Blacks to win. Go the All Blacks, man. Definitely.
Pretty good pundit too. And while in London for the World Cup tournament, Lomu also played his part in a haka to support the All Blacks campaign. Have a look. giant among men. Yeah, great lasting image of 40-year-old Lomu on rugby's biggest stage. Well, as people take in the news of Jonah's death, there's been an outpouring of support for his family on social media. We have a selection now on Twitter from past and present players to comedians to Olympic athletes and overseas sports teams. This is Israel Dag. Jonah, you made rugby what it is today. Sean Fitzpatrick calling Jonah a very special person. Jermaine Clement from Flight of the Conchords, a giant in sports. Nick Willis, Olympic medalist. Look at them all. Even the Black Caps. Zane Lowe from the music world. Everybody wanting to pay their tributes. The impact of Jonah on the game acknowledged by everybody. Those, of course, and Ben Natalino from the Warriors. Just a selection of the hundreds of tributes pouring in from around the world on social media. Welcome back to this One News special on Jonah Lomu, who's died at the age of just 40. One News reporter Paul Hobbs is at the Lomu home in Auckland. Paul, can you just update us on what's been happening there?
Well, in the last hour, Simon, some of Jonah Lomu's dearest friends and teammates have left the house. Michael Jones, that great flanker, was one of his role models. He left the place with Junior Afisa Tanu and Ronnie Clark. And Michael Jones, as he's wandered down the street, just put his arm over Junior Tanu'u's shoulder to comfort him. I think they look very, very upset, both wearing glasses. We've seen the hearse leave the property here, but things have quietened down in the last few minutes. Some of the work on tidying the fence out, the grass and the lawns and the hedges have been done. I think people are just sort of gathering together and gathering their thoughts at the moment. But it's interesting you talked about the humility of Jonah before. When I was at Wesley College earlier this afternoon, one of the teachers talked about the great hulking Jonah Lomu, just 1 year out of school, came back, plonked himself on the staff room floor and said, "Hey, teachers," he was an All Black, just a young All Black, and he came back to school just the same old Jonah that turned up there and toiled so hard.
All right, Paul, thank you very much for that. Well, along with his huge tackles and running, Jonah Lomu was also known for his courage when it came to beating the odds. He spoke to Paul Holmes in August 2007 about getting on top of his condition and his hopes for a return to rugby. Have a look.
Are you determined to play whatever the results are?
Yeah, I'm I'm just wanting to get back on the field more than anything else.
You're still as determined?
Oh, yeah. I'm off to the gym after this. My body weight, fluctuated quite badly sometimes. 1 month I got up to 148 Ks. So, I was retaining a lot of fluid.
Gee, that must have been a big worry to you, that weight fluctuation.
Yeah, I got a bit of a shock. One of the drugs is actually steroid-based, and it's not performance enhancing, but it retains a lot of the fluid on you. So I was pushing iron, and that compounded on top of, pushing weights, and I was retaining a lot of fluid. So if a lot of people look at the photos, you see the puffiness around my cheeks and all that. That's from, from all the treatment that I've had and all the drugs that's been put into me for 6 months. And I just wanted to get rid of the drugs now and just, even if the doctor said, hey, we need to put you on some more drugs, I'd say no, because it makes you feel so... you don't have energy or time. It feels like that you just wake up in the morning, have breakfast and go back to bed.
He was such a fighter too. A final word now from our special guest, Phil Gifford. Phil, very few people get to, regardless of their sport, transcendent. Jonah was one of those. How will you remember him?
Well, I think first of all, as possibly the most exciting rugby player the world's ever seen, one of the all-time All Black greats, and as a person, I think the most wonderful thing about Jonah Lomu was that, considering the absolute avalanche of fame that descended on him so quickly when he was so young, he stayed a decent and humble person through it.
Can't ask for much more than a Kiwi bloke, can you?
No, you can't.
But a global superstar.
Absolutely, totally, yeah.
Phil Gifford, thank you very much. Thanks for joining us on this One News special, and thank you for joining us at home as well. Jonah Lomu, that 1.96 metre, 119 kilograms, 6'5" and 19 odd stone, I think. 19 odd stone, 6'5". Can you imagine it? He left a lasting mark on rugby around the world. The hulking giant, as Paul Hobbs referred to him, and as Phil Gifford just told us, of course, a global giant, a global superstar, no matter what your sport is. A man who transcended his sport. And honestly, ask yourselves, how many people can you think of in whatever sport who say they're bigger than that? We've got so much more coming up on Jonah Lomu in the One News Hour at 6 o'clock. That's just moments away. And right now, though, we're going to leave you for just a bit with these images of the 40-year-old All Black great Jonah Tali Lomu's career.
There's a tree I Kia ora, good evening. A mighty giant of rugby has fallen. Jonah Lomu has died at the age of 40 in his Auckland home.
The most famous rugby player the world's ever seen had just recently arrived back in New Zealand after a long overseas trip that took in the Rugby World Cup. The boy from South Auckland overcame adversity to become a sporting superstar whose humility also touched lives the world over. We have extensive coverage tonight and begin with rugby reporter Andrew Saville with the news that's left many stunned.
Jonah Lomu was just 20 when he forged his own chapter in rugby history.
Lomu!
The youngster from South Auckland's Wesley College stamped his arrival on the world stage in emphatic style, going on to become the first global superstar of the game.
His bursting onto the international stage took the game to another level and was probably an important spark for the game getting the opportunity to go fully professional, because what he did at the 95 World Cup certainly turned some heads.
He could run around, you could run over the top of you, but off the field, as soon as that final whistle sort of blew, the softest handshake, big smile on his face.
The star winger's time at the top was limited. Diagnosed with chronic kidney illness in his prime, he died suddenly in the early hours of this morning.
It was an incredible shock to myself and obviously to the family that Jonah's been in pretty good shape in the last few months. He arrived back from Dubai yesterday and unfortunately suddenly collapsed and died at home early this morning.
The illness eventually ended Lomu's on-field career. He needed a kidney transplant by the time he was 30. But the end of rugby didn't mean the end of his high-profile lifestyle. He was married 3 times and worked tirelessly as a global ambassador for sport, kidney disease and children's charities. His charity work in London last month saw him dining with the Prime Minister.
To be blunt, I'm absolutely shocked because in the entire dinner I had with him, he said to me, actually, from a health perspective, he was feeling better than he had for a very long period of time.
When you think about his career now in full retrospect, it's like a shooting star. It's like that Michael Jackson song, Gone Too Soon.
Lomu's death was even more unexpected as he and his family had only just arrived home. They'd holidayed together in Dubai after 3 months in the UK, where he'd been a Rugby World Cup ambassador. Family are now gathered at Lomu's Epsom home, which he spoke fondly of just weeks ago.
I look forward to going home. Myself, my wife and the kids are looking forward to going home, seeing our 2 dogs and seeing our friends and family.
So much left to cherish. Jonah Lomu is survived by his wife and 2 young sons.
Andrew Saville joins us now, our youngest ever All Black, a man who left a huge mark on our national game. Where does he stand in the pantheon of greats?
Well, I think, Simon, he was, is and probably always will be rugby's biggest ever superstar. Let's not forget he burst onto the scene as a very shy teenager in 1994. At the Hong Kong Sevens, and then made his test debut later in that year. And then just 12 months later, he became a global superstar, not just rugby superstar.
Barely 20.
A global sport superstar in 1995 with that game against England and the previous matches at the World Cup in South Africa. Also, he was a superstar for the Blues. Let's not forget the early years of Super Rugby when rugby was just turning professional. Jonah was the star in that star-studded Blues outfit. His beloved county's Manukau. He loved playing for them too. Whenever Jonah was playing, you wanted to watch the game, whether it be on TV or in the flesh. Whenever he got the ball and ran, you moved closer to the edge of your seat, anticipating one of these fantastic blockbusting runs from Jonah Lomu. Off the field, genial giant. He was the epitome of that phrase. Very relaxed, very humble, always had that nod, that wink and that cheeky grin, and was most comfortable around young fans.
Wonderful touch with children.
He lived for his young fans. The last memory that I'll have of Jonah Lomu, and it'll always stick in my mind now, apart from all the other memories I had of covering Jonah over 20 years, the Rugby World Cup final. He was brought out onto the field as a World Cup ambassador. There were superstars of the game broadcasting to every country, or a lot of countries around the world. All the fans, the only man the fans wanted to see was Jonah Lomu.
Rugby's global superstar.
Exactly.
Andrew, thank you very much. We'll have more from you later in sport.
Well, there's been a few people going in and out of Jonah Lomu's home in the Auckland suburb of Epsom. Paul Hobbs is there. He joins us now live. Paul.
Yes, Wendy, in the last hour, perhaps one of his great friends and teammates, Michael Jones, left the house with a Ronnie Clark and a Fessa Junior Tanu. They walked out very somberly, and Michael Jones just threw his arm over a Fessa Tanu. I think they were clearly in grief. The hearse left just a few moments earlier than that, and other than that now, it is indeed very quiet. A couple of hours ago, a statement was released by his wife, Nadine, and it said, "It's with great sadness I must announce the passing of my dear husband, Jonah Lomu, who died last night." And she says, "As you can imagine, this is a devastating loss for our family," and they've asked for some privacy, especially for their 2 children. But at the moment, some friends, many teammates are speaking with great admiration of this great All Black. Here's Chris Chang.
Here he goes again! A world without Jonah, Big J to his friends, seems scarcely believable.
This massive person that was Jonah Lomu, you know, like, and I'm talking not just in terms of his physicality, but his personality and just who he was to myself and all his friends and no doubt his family, just gone.
Kronfeld! Lomu! Lomu and Josh Kronfeld weren't just teammates.
He was my buddy to go to the movies before tests.
He was also a gentle giant.
Somebody who would always do what he could, not just, you know, while he was patron of Kidney Kids, he also would look after any, you know, sick kid.
A good friend and neighbour.
I reflect on an article he wrote saying his dream was to watch his children grow to be adults, and that isn't going to happen.
Word of his death rippled through Parliament as it did workplaces across the country.
It was his first game in Sydney when he got the ball after 70 metres and sitting about 7 guys flying. He passed the ball to Quanfield and Quanfield was over.
I think he was our first truly global All Black.
A great All Black, taken way too young.
The rugby world losing another of its favourite sons.
This has been a pretty tough year for us, that of in the rugby fraternity locally, so to lose another brother is pretty tough.
It's like a reminder of just how fragile we are.
A mighty man with a lasting legacy. Chris Chang, One News.
Well, we've just had a couple approach the family home with a large bunch of flowers, and just a few moments earlier, one of the fellas that lives up the street here, he came with a small bunch of flowers, and he said, "I didn't really know Jonah, but he said, I once saw him down the street," and he said, "Hey, bro," and I thought he was just a fantastic neighbour, a fantastic mate, and he said it was just the mark of the humility of this fine and great All Black.
Indeed. Thank you, Paul. Paul Hobbs in Auckland.
And in a measure of his global status, Jonah Lomu's death is making headlines right across the world. All the major news sites like CNN and the BBC featuring the All Blacks great on their homepage. Tributes also prominent on websites across the Tasman. Also paying homage, the charities Lomu did work for. The colourful jerseys, part of a campaign to buy UNICEF-inspired Christmas gifts instead of giving those NAF presents. Seen here with his sons now, Jonah was a UNICEF ambassador, promoting work with children right around the globe.
Well, the Kiwi Colossus was feared on the field, but loved and respected off it. He was also an inspiration to many Pacific Islanders.
Yes, it's been 40 years of both challenges and celebrations for Jonah Lomu. Pacific correspondent Barbara Drever looks back at his life.
Jonah Lomu exploded into the international landscape 20 years ago, but his road to rugby stardom started here at Wesley College.
6'5", weigh 118 kgs.
Rugby, a welcome escape from his troubled South Auckland home life. Born in 1975 to Tongan immigrants, he left his home at age 14, estranged from his dad Samisi. Even as a teenager, he was destined for great things.
You just knew there was someone there that was a wonderful football player, gifted athlete, and as it turned out, a superstar.
The youngest player ever to be selected to the All Blacks. While he took time to grow into his stride, when he did, he took no prisoners.
Hold the phone! Oh!
It's said his run through English defenders in the 1995 World Cup semi-final is what prompted media mogul Rupert Murdoch to start buying up broadcast rights for the sport.
Lomu! Again!
Paving the way for the professional era. His power on the field translating to a marketing dream.
Can I have a slice then?
No, but you can have a smell.
While Jonah coped with the attention he attracted for his skill, dealing with interest in his private life, he married South African Tanya Rata, the first wife of 3, in secret, a move that rocked his traditional Tongan family.
Your mum is very upset.
I am too. She was the lady that brought me onto the surf, and not to have her there was it's the hardest thing.
But harder times were ahead. The big man hit by a big disease, a kidney disorder and a marriage breakdown. While there was a brief reprieve, Jonah's health deteriorated.
To me, I'd risk everything to live the dream that I started.
To be an All Black.
During his darkest days, the second wife, Fiona Taylor, was at his side, and his good friend, Grant Kariyama, who gifted him his kidney and 7 years of good health.
I could never ever repay you for what you have done.
While he never regained his intimidating form in the years ahead, his strength of mind became a testament to the man.
For me, this is what I want to do, and this is what I feel is right for me.
He used his mana to promote the sport and charities close to his heart. After divorcing wife of 5 years, Fiona, wedding bells tolled again for Jonah. Nadine Quirk, mother of his 2 children, Darrell and Brayley.
You cherish every day that you have with them and every moment that you have, and money can't buy that.
Jonah's joy as a dad reunited him with his own. When his body rejected his replacement kidney in 2011, it was his family who gave him strength. In turn, he gave his heart to the game and country he loved. Barbara Drever, One News.
Prime Minister John Key described him as the first true global superstar of rugby. Today, here at home, fans from all over the country were sharing memories.
It's a tragedy, a great New Zealander passing away, that's awful, and rest in peace, the big man.
He was a figure to look up to. He was an amazing man. That's really sad.
Inspired a lot of people around New Zealand, so, one of those being me, so, it's a sad time for New Zealand and New Zealand rugby.
It's going to sit with everyone for a while, that's for sure, especially after Jerry Collins and whatnot too, Rugby World Cup. But, yeah, it's thoughts go out to his family,
How brave he was when he found out he was so ill, and not telling the New Zealand public, and he went through what he did before it really came public, so that was pretty amazing.
A dynamic sort of guy, legend in his time, and it's pretty sad really. We had just heard before, and it's shock.
He was a new figure to rugby, something we'd never seen before.
You'll always remember the try scored against England, wouldn't you? Yeah. You could never forget about the try scored against England.
And even the people in England that were pure soccer fans knew who Jonah Lomu was. They might have known who the All Blacks were and what have you, or rugby people knew who the All Blacks were, but I think he did a lot for putting the game of rugby right out there.
And I just remember him as being really the first superstar of international rugby, really, and he seemed like a really nice guy.
He built a reputation that none of us expected, I think, and he really became a man in his own right.
Well, Andrew joins us now with sport, and hard to know where to start as the news of Jonah's death sinks in.
Still a shock, isn't it, Wendy? Hard to fathom, really. The man who changed the game forever. We reflect on his greatest moments, talk to his former All Blacks doctor, as sporting stars also across the spectrum pay their respects. We also hear from one of his closest teammates. As we still come to grips tonight with this news of Jonah Lomu's death, let's reflect on the blockbusting winger's finest moments through the sports news this evening. We'll also hear from other sporting personalities as this loss hits home, and one of his closest rugby mates. We'll have more on that in just a moment. But 20 years ago, rugby was on the edge of falling apart, trying to change from the amateur era into professionalism, with rebel factions knocking on the door. Lomu's performance at the 1995 Rugby World Cup in South Africa changed the game forever.
How can we ever forget that try?
Lomu!
Lomu's staggering run against England and other teams in South Africa helped sell the game to its initial professional backer, media mogul Rupert Murdoch. Murdoch loved what he saw. Rugby signed with News Limited. The rest is professional history. Let's not forget Lomu scored 4 tries that day against the English and instantly became a global superstar.
He set a new standard to what a winger could be. No one could have thought that a 6'4" beast of a 120 kg beast of a man could be playing winger, that's a lock.
A year earlier, Lomu tore apart the field in the Hong Kong Sevens at the tender age of 18. But it was the '95 World Cup where we were all run over by Lomu fever.
He single-handedly, I believe, put rugby back on the map, and we've got to make sure that we understand that and respect that. You go anywhere, and although the All Blacks are huge, you know, the one player that they talk about, well, back in my time, and you know, was Jonah Lomu, and that's who they know. And obviously, it's changed now, but you know, he really started that.
The size, the pace, the fend. This was 1996 in Wellington, all with his serious illness growing in the shadows.
He never let on that the journey had this sort of outcome in the future, and he wouldn't. He just wouldn't. It's not his way, I don't think.
The match-winning Millennium Test in Sydney in 2000, just one more example of his eye-catching abilities across 37 Test tries. From the old MPC with his beloved counties team to Super Rugby with the Blues and Hurricanes, Jonah left indelible marks. Recent comparisons have been made with current Test winger Julian Savia, but as Savia has even stated himself, there will only ever be one Jonah Lomu.
Yes, Jonah became a sensation in the mid-1990s, but despite all the fanfare and limelight, his serious kidney illness early on was kept behind closed doors. Now, the man who treated Lomu and was one of his closest confidants is former All Blacks doctor John Mayhew. He spoke this afternoon with Martin Tasker.
John Mayhew paying his respects at the family home, still trying to absorb the news.
He's been a fantastic person. He's been a great friend. Obviously, I've been his doctor for a long period of time. My children have grown up with Jonah. They've known him as a family friend, so it's just staggering. It's a very sad day.
Close to Lomu throughout his career and beyond, Mayhew has decades of memories to call on.
I think he's such a warm person. He's so good to so many people. He's got no ego. You know, he most probably made a few bad decisions at times in his life, but I've never known him to be malicious. He's a very strong, powerful individual, but never was aggressive in the football field, really.
His physician's recollections tinged with professional concern.
The game that stands out for me was one for a New Zealand Barbarian side in 1996, before the public were aware. He had kidney problems, and we went to Twickenham, and he shouldn't have played. He was very sick, and I said, look, don't play. And he said, no, I've got to play. The fans have come to see me play. And he was humble about it, but he played and played quite well.
Lomu, the big man with the big heart off the field as well.
And he's done a lot of good to so many people, and you know, he'd do a lot of charity things that people are unaware of, and he'd help people out, and he'd go to children's birthdays unannounced and things like that.
And there's this insight from someone who helped Lomu through the medical issues that so hampered him.
If we'd seen Jonah at full throttle for 10 years, would have been a great sight.
Still plenty to remember him by. Martin Tasker.
Jonah's death adds to an already tough year for the rugby fraternity, coming just months after the loss of another former All Black and Hurricane, Jerry Collins. Former New Zealand captain Tana Umanga played with both of them, and today reflected on his relationship with Jonah.
We gave each other a lot of advice. Whether we listened to it, you know, a lot of it was in jest, but yes, look, we helped each other out as much as we could, and you know, to be brutally honest, as we are, we didn't keep in touch as much as, you know, other close friends do. But when it came down to when things happened, we were always around. Big things happen like that, we all lead our own lives, and as what's happened with Jerry, and which was very much the same. In tough times, you know who you can count on. You don't have to see them every day, but when things happen, you know, those people are always there. And I suppose that's the mark of the kind of people we are.
And they say no player is bigger than the game itself, but for most of his career, Jonah Lomu was the game. Whether it was scoring tries or engaging with children and fans in the community, Lomu was a face known all around the world.
I think he was the first big star of the game, certainly from our neck of the woods, and I think our Adidas contract probably was initiated by Robbie Lewis-Dreyfus seeing him play in the World Cup, and I know that the television channel certainly saw rugby as an opportunity to put some more very rich content on board after that World Cup.
This tweet from former Wellington teammate Nemia Tialata is summing up the barnstorming winger and his carefree, fun-loving personality. Well, let's cross now to the man who's written about rugby for most of his life and covered pretty much every test match and many other games Jonah played in, and that man is Phil Gifford. Phil, what's your endearing memory of Jonah Lomu?
Well, I think, first of all, the fact is that he was a catalyst for an enormous change, the biggest change in the 20th century for the game, and yet always stayed true to himself, which is a tribute to the sort of person he was. From a personal standpoint, I've been thinking today the last time that I saw Jonah, it was about a year ago, out of all things, a monster truck event at Waikaraka Park in Auckland, and I introduced my then 3-year-old grandson Cooper to him, and I can almost see it in my mind's eye now, Sav, that this enormous hand very gently engulfing Cooper's hand and shaking his hand and saying, I hope you enjoy the day. And as I've thought about the day, as the news has really sunk in, I think the saddest part to me is there's a loss to the rugby community, obviously, but an even bigger loss is obviously to Jonah's family, and also the personal loss to the man that Jonah tragically will not live to see his sons grow and will never have the joy of being a grandfather himself. And he was such a kind and decent person to children. That's the single saddest thing, I think, about the tragedy today.
That's Phil Gifford. Thanks, Phil, long-time rugby journalist and broadcaster. Yes, our thoughts are very much with Jonah's wife and 2 young boys this evening. A very sad, sad day for rugby, for sport and the country of New Zealand in general. Now, over the last 20 years, Jonah Lomu has touched us all. On the field, unstoppable. Off the field, the big guy, as he was known, was very much a genial giant and an absolute fighter to the end, clearly. The biggest superstar, without a doubt, the game has ever seen.
Synonymous with rugby. Thank you very much, Sav. Mike and Tony, one of my great memories is those messages of support the All Blacks get before the game. Do you remember the one they got where it said, rugby is a team game, guys. Remember, the rest of you pass the ball to Jonah.
Yeah, I do remember that. We're obviously going big on this tonight. We've got Justin Marshall and Keith
The rugby world mourns the loss of
live.
All Blacks great Jonah Lomu. We're going to say goodnight and leave you with some of the moments that made the big man one of the most influential players of all time. Enjoy.
Jonah Lomu's range of skills is ever lengthening. And Lomu! To Lomu! Lomu! Hold the phone! Here he goes again! The big man is over! The big man, Jonah Lomu. Back inside to Lomu. Lomu!
Beautiful memories there, and what's been such a sad day, a
Very
shock,
sad.
a real
and
shock
shocking
today.
day. More
Good
on
evening,
Jonah
it's
Lomu
lovely
tonight.
to have you with us on what has been a very sad day for a lot of New Zealanders today. It comes quite a shock, I think, Jonah Lomu's death. We all knew he was sick, but for it to happen now, it does seem very out of the blue, doesn't
I
it?
think the great difficulty was that he was at the Rugby World Cup, and he looked well, and he looked healthy, and he was there with his family.
He was busy.
He toured up and down the country in England, and in fact he's been on social media these last couple of days. He came back home through Dubai, and there were plenty of pictures of him having a great time and just full of the joys of life. He was still doing the dialysis, which was the most amazing thing, with his family on holiday. It's 3 days a week, 6 hours each time, 18 hours. So he's going into clinics up and down England, doing the dialysis for all of that time while still trying to have a holiday and, you know, spend some time with his family.
And that job, every flight he hopped on, he had to be whizzed to a hospital to make sure he could carry on. So
it is a very sad, sad business. Let's talk about Jonah Lomu some more. Justin Marshall is with us from Queenstown. Justin, good evening to you.
Yeah, good evening, Mike.
Last time you saw him, how was he?
I thought he looked great, to be honest, and I know that he was working really hard on his health. He was obviously overseas at the time, and, you know, this disease that, you know, so cruelly struck his rugby career down, but also that he battled with Off the pitch as well, he was fighting really hard at, and the last time I spoke to him, he was full of smiles, full of positivity, loving family life, and in general loving his role outside of the rugby field. And today's news, Mike, to be honest, it's really knocked the wind out of me. It's a massive blow for the All Black community after the loss of Jerry and Norm Berryman, now to have probably the greatest player, in my mind, easily the greatest player to ever walk the planet, pass us today. I'm still in a bit of shock, to be fair.
You wrote a very nice piece in the Herald today, I noticed, and you talked of his presence on the field and how that made you feel invincible. Was that the general feeling in the team, that this was somebody special and you could all feel a bit comfortable about it?
Yeah, look, Mike, if I can be a little selfish and talk about my own circumstances, it would be that I came into the All Blacks at the end of the '95 Rugby World Cup when we toured France, and I sat like every other New Zealander watching Jonah destroy everybody in that World Cup, and looked at him in awe. And then I got named in the All Blacks, and the next thing that I recognised was Jonah Lomu walking into the changing room, and then walking into team meetings, and then I was passing him the ball on the rugby field. And then when I made my Test debut, there was a feeling of comfort looking across that changing room, seeing the faces, but then visualising Jonah Lomu there in that 11 jersey that I'd seen 3 or 4 months before, destroying people, now my teammate. And it's pretty awe-inspiring to have that in your changing room, to go out and make your Test debut and know that that presence is there, and to have that player who loved the All Blacks so much, who wore his heart on his on the fern, being a part of you, and it certainly helped my confidence, that's for sure.
One of the things I loved about him most is how he came out of his shell over the years. Started off very, very shy, but eventually came out of himself. And yet you argue, and I thought this was so interesting, even more of a raconteur behind the scenes, a man with lovely stories to tell.
Yeah, absolutely. And what you see on the field was completely different to what he was off the field. And I so enjoyed Jonah and the way that he not only approached the public, but he approached his teammates. He was a superstar, mate. Honestly, some of the times that we were out when he was getting celebrities like Mariah Carey wanting to meet him, and also getting incredible opportunities. I remember the Jonah burger, when that came out, and he would wander off into McDonald's and come out not with burgers just for himself, for all of us. And concert tickets that he got given, he would bring them on the bus and say, who wants to go to Ronan Keating tonight? And you can come out the back and meet the band. He wasn't selfish in his superstardom, but you could also, something people don't know about him, you could sit down with Jonah and you could have a 30 or 40-minute conversation and nothing was about rugby. It would be about his love of cars, his music, everything that wasn't rugby, and he could hold your attention span really easily.
They're lovely words and lovely thoughts, Justin. I appreciate you coming on the program tonight very much. Good to catch up.
Well, Keith Quinn was in the commentary box while Jonah made many of his spectacular tries, and Keith is with me now from Wellington. Good evening, Keith. I know today has really shocked you. How deeply will Jonah's death be felt?
Thank you very much for having me on, Tony. His death will be deeply felt in New Zealand. I know we have a history in our game when the old stars fade, the new stars come up. Such as we've seen this year with the Rugby World Cup win in London. But we never forget the old stars, and that's what I love about our adulation for people in the past, like Colin Meads, like Jonah Lomu. And I just hope that this country holds the feeling that it has today about the admiration, the adulation and the love we had for Jonah. Hold it fast to our hearts for a long time, if not forever.
You followed his career the entire way. What are your first memories of him in those early years?
Well, TV New Zealand did a live telecast of some secondary school sevens out in Auckland there one time, and he was playing for a team. I remember it was Two Shades of Blue he was playing for. It was the school he was running for. Perhaps it was Wesley College, I can't recall. But even when he was a schoolboy, those of us who were there in the production, commentating and in the team sending out the coverage, we were amazed at this kid called Lomu. We had to look at his name, and I remember one time they waited for the second for the second game on the day to start, so they could get him onto the field so that he would take part in the coverage. And that was the first time I saw him within a couple of seasons, maybe one, maybe two, at Hong Kong in the Sevens, blowing them away up there. Then in the All Blacks, a slightly stumbling start in the All Blacks Test arena as a teenage boy, but then a year later in '95, just blowing everyone away at the World Cup and leaving there the first huge imprint of the footprint that has been his impact in life from that point on.
Keith, I want to stay with 95 now because we can't talk to you without mentioning that magic piece of commentary. Let's just have a look at it first.
Wide to Lomu. He's got the bounce. He's heading it off his opposite. Lomu.
It never gets old. How significant was that moment for Jonah?
Well, the simple version of that was it was a mistake by the commentator who was trying to find some pre-prepared notes. But in fact, I'm very proud now that maybe people will remember it as the commentator also being aghast at what we were all seeing all over, not just New Zealand, but all over the rugby world. Because before we got to that point in rugby's story, when teams went along at whatever level to pre-season training, big guys went over there, and little guys went to be 5/8s, and speedy guys went to be wingers. And Jonah was a big guy from the forwards who's picked to be a winger. And there was the first impression of a big man out on the wing, running very fast, very athletic. And from that point on, well, you look at the World Cup this year, just about every nation had a Jonah Lomu on the wing. So from that point on, he changed the game. And so that's why I'm very proud now of that commentary. And Tony, of course, I think I've told you this before. People talk to me about that commentary all the time, and it's only 20 years old.
I think you'll be hearing it a lot more from now on in. What makes him so special, not just in the early years, but to still be, enduring right to this point?
Well, I'm not a great social commentator, but I think we should all take note of what we can produce in New Zealand. Jonah came from modest circumstances. His story and the early photographs and early films show that. He was in modest circumstances in South Auckland. We know that he was in troubles, in some gang-related things in the company he kept in his teenage years. But then his family worked hard to save to get him into a good school which taught him good values, and so he became somebody who could use the sporting gifts that had been given to him to become an All Black, to then understand the world, to become the global person that he is today. And this is a beautiful New Zealand story. When I first interviewed Jonah Lomu, he could hardly take his eyes off his shoes. He was so quiet and modest, and now look at him. He's interviewed by all the great interviewers all over the world, and he's got statements and comments and commentary on the world situation that they're all listening to. It's a beautiful New Zealand story of what we can produce in modern New Zealand today. And Jonah, sad to say, has passed, but he's the best example of it.
He sure is. Keith Quinn, thank you so much for your time this evening.
Thank you.
Wear the jersey with pride and play with a lot of mana and do the haka with pride.
More from Jonah later on in the program. Geez, I remember when he first debuted, you remember it was 94 or whatever, Laurie Mains threw him in against France and he didn't play well, and you thought, geez, is he too young, too soon, too deep, what's he done?
Is it all a bit much?
All came right, though. All came right.
I see you soar above the sky, and in my heart it'll always be a place for you for all my life.
Well, it's quite emotional, isn't it?
Well, the Wesley College Honours Board, where he went to school, it's discus, it's shot put, it's long jump, it's high jump, it's 800, it's 400, it's 1500. He won the lot. Could have done anything. Amazing, eh?
Amazing guy. Jonah Lomu will always be a special part of New Zealand rugby and a special part of all of us who have followed and delighted in his remarkable career. Reflecting this afternoon on what makes him so special, there's obviously the glittering on-field performances, his incredible physical presence, those wonderful tries, but his transformation as both a player and person has really connected us to him as Kiwis. We watched as a media-shy team burst onto the scenes in '94. We shared the delight as he mowed down Mike Catt and hit superstar status. We were shocked when he revealed all about his secret wedding, dismayed at his health struggles, and more recently we've witnessed the 360 of that media-shy teen who turned into one of the best speakers of any of the former All Blacks, full of honesty, compassion and grace. Jonah Lomu is the ultimate rugby rock star, the hard man who in reality was actually a gentle giant. Even if you don't like rugby and know just one player, Jonah Lomu is it. And what a tragedy to lose such a special man so young.
Yes, Jonah Lomu was a very good example, I thought, this afternoon of one of life's great lessons. No matter what your lot, make the most of it. Quality always beats quantity. I admired his spirit in the difficult days. I loved that he revelled in his kids. He wasn't supposed to have kids, of course, so he embraced the miracle and talked openly of them being his reason for being. There is no escaping the unfairness of all of this, a life cut so dreadfully short, the unanswered questions as to what might have been, the cruelty of such a rare talent not being able to shine on its own terms. But the story and the life is rich, nevertheless. The sadness of the brevity is at least in part made up for by the brilliance of the contribution. What a privilege it was for those of us that bore witness to it all. Our thoughts are with his family and those closest to him.
No, I just like to class myself as just an ordinary schoolboy.
When the night has come,
hold the phone,
and the land is dark,
Lomu,
and the moon
Lomu and
is the only light we'll see.
Lomu again.
No, I won't be afraid. Oh,
He's a European Santa, I'm the Polynesian one.
afraid. Just as long.
Lomu.
They're at a point where they won't get better, isn't that true? I've been at that point for years.